Baldur's Gate 3 will be remembered as one of the greatest CRPGs of all time. Released as a feature-complete game and set within the primary setting of Faerun for Dungeons & Dragons, with 8 full support patches which added an immense amount of content, from class options to story content. It is truly an exhaustive work. And with each of those classes, you can multi-class and min-max to create truly powerful builds. However, let's step away, and what gameplay decisions would you have to make if you were restricted to 4 characters who only used one class? Today, we'll find out. Here are the rules. We're going to play 4 characters who all share the same class. They're all going to use unique subclasses, and we must be playing on Honor Mode. And while we can use exploits like scamming merchants, we can't skip fights like Merkel by using barrels, for instance. And finally, unless the game genuinely crashes, we're not going to be doing any save scumming by Alt F4ing the game. So if we lose, we lose. And without further ado, let's see how a party of 4 fighters fares in Honor Mode. We begin the game with my favorite player character, a female drow, Dark Urge. Get used to her because you're going to be seeing her a lot if I do this as a series. And while I initially thought I should play the origin characters that represent each class, there simply isn't enough origin characters, so I'm just going to romance their representatives instead. Selecting the fighter, protection fighting style, and we go with this stat spread. I'm going to be respecking a lot, so this is just how I start. We name ourselves Fuida because we fight, and we randomize our guardian, and begin. This run starts off great because I failed to free us.
From this case, free us.
However, the encounters here on the Nautiloid are pretty trivial, especially if you're starting as a martial class. Quickly moving on and freeing my base Shadowheart, we move on to the Helm. Shadowheart, as usual, fails both command drops, so no Everburn Blade for us. Making it to the Helm, we get to the beach and officially start Act 1. Landing on the beach, I wake up Shadowheart and add her to the squad. Skipping these brains, I also start securing a bunch of containers which I'm going to eventually need to scam all the merchants in the game. I borrow this hand from this portal and cut down a Mind Flayer to secure level 2. Level 2 for fighters just gives us action assurance. Now should be a good time to mention what I'll be doing with the non-fighter companions until I get Withers. I'm just going to try to not use them. My usual Act 1 route avoids most combat, so it really shouldn't be a problem. I free my wife for this run, Lae'zel, and start everyone's favorite grove fight. This fight, as usual, isn't a big deal. You have a bunch of meat shields, and the dangerous enemies will focus them usually. So, 2 martial characters, Lae'zel and Fuida, can just kill everybody. Finishing up the fight, we see a bunch of yelling and I punch Zevlar, though it takes 2 of my inspiration die. I initially did this to steal his gloves, but I forgot we're all going to be fighters, but gear's gear. I then began scamming the traders here. If you are uninitiated to this exploit, that will never be patched, here's a quick guide. All you need are 2 containers and a controller plugged into your PC. If you're a controller player or playing on console, you're kinda SOL. Give the trader 2 containers, fill one with your selection of goodies, put that pouch into your other container, then switch to your controller. Trade with the merchant again, open that container, and hold down the Select All button, then send it to any party member that is not a part of the conversation. And there you go, you can now scam all the merchants in the entire game out of their stock. As for how I feel about this, you play this game enough, you'll know how to get money. It just involves scrounging up literally everything not bolted to the ground. And once you've done it enough, it's pretty tedious. You can do it or not, it depends on you. I don't like having to grab everything, and I just want to get the items I'm gonna get anyway, so I'm just gonna do that. Regardless, I go and save Alarbella from a snake, steal Kaga's chest, but forget to do her quest, and then go get the spider egg pouch that I almost never use, but of course fail all the checks to get it, so I have to fight these spiders. And heading on over to the Blighted Village, I pick up the Haste Helm, securing enough XP for level 3. With access to our subclasses, I make Fuida into an Eldritch Knight and Lae'zel into a Battlemaster, and since I can't respec Shadowheart yet, she's still a Cleric. I go around using my Drow appearance to secure some more XP, saving Barkus, and then I go grab the Necromancy book, but since I'm not a spellshite, I can't recruit Shovel, so I'll never summon her for this run. I pick up Scratch, and again, forget to do his quest, so I won't be able to summon him, even though he's in the camp. I pick up Karlach to fill out the girl squad before heading to the Goblin camp. Entering the Goblin camp makes it so Withers will show up in your camp, so I can finally respec the team. Shadowheart is going to be an Arcane Archer, which actually comes with guidance, which is awesome. I also get a selection of arcane arrows, and while my initial plan was to be spamming Piercing Arrow, I eventually realized these are really not that good, and I ended up just using the regular bonus arrows. Karlach will of course be the champion crit fishing fighter, and while I get into the specifics and my thoughts on fighter as a whole at the end of this video, let's just say champion sucks. Entering the Goblin camp itself, I get myself a nice brand so I can use some specific gear later, and get beat on by Loviatar's simp. I decide to then head over to Joaquin's Rest for some more free XP and some items, saving Floric, and for the first time, I'm not grappling the Spell Sparkler. And actually using the Sparky points reinforces how much better the Sparkler actually is as a reward item. And while this weapon is a thrown weapon and can be held in one hand, it's still terrible compared to the staff or bow. Regardless, I go and grab Lump, and thanks to the Friends and Inspiration die, he'll be useful, in case I get into a sticky situation later. Leaving Joaquin's Rest, I go to get the Titan String Bow, and while I initially didn't plan on using it, because I have a thrower who's going to be using my elixirs, I picked it up just in case, which ended up being the correct decision. Dealing with the gnolls near the caravan, as well as all the hyenas for their ears, I prepared to take on Flynn. I simply waited to dominate her and had her kill the Zend and her pack, which allowed me to clean everything up and take their ears, as well as the crate. Returning to Joaquin's Rest and entering the Zent hideout, I almost fail the checks I need to return the crate. And I was able to scam the bow as well as all the other useful items from the trader, and then using the most powerful spell in the game, Minor Illusion, I was able to kill all the Zent here for their XP, using their conveniently placed smoke powder barrels. This helps me secure level 4 and my first feats. Foida picks up Tavern Brawler because she's a thrower, Shadowheart gets Sharpshooter because she's shooting, Lae'zel's getting Great Weapon Master, and Karlach gets an ASI. Looting the hideout, I long rest to get the yapping from my visitor done so I can start eating the space gummies, and return to the Goblin camp so I can send Volo inside before I remember I should probably go grab the Owlbear. And here we get to see the benefits of leveling a martial class. Having 4th level fighters with Action Surge lets us melt this first Owlbear before the mate even joins the fight.
Try something else.
And eventually our action economy and martial attacks just melt the mate as well. Long resting, we get a friend named Alfira, who will eventually be murdered by us, and hiding our body with our strength when we wake up, we get away with murder. Freeing the Owlbear cub once we get back to the Goblin camp, we finally get ready to clear it out. Making sure to grab the Bow of Awareness from Roa Moonglow, I use the kidnapping technique to get rid of some of the witnesses before I attack Minthara. I'm going to want her in my girl squad later, just because I want to, so I intend to non-lethal her. After smacking her a bit, I steal her stuff and return to the priestess. Talking to the spiders, I shoot the lock, which starts a fight. However, instead of the fight I want, the fight gets bugged, and it's happened a few times since patch 8, with only some of the goblins being aggroed when I attack them. Killing Gut and stealing her space gummy, I remember I can make the Spear of Absolute, and decide to just start using it, just because its arc is better to throw it. I go then and free Volo so I can get the eye later, and it's Ragslin time. I learned that they're immune to Minor Illusion unless I do his speech challenge, and I do so. Then I use my Cloud of Dagger scroll to start the fight. As some extra gobos got aggroed and I didn't really want to run all the way over there, I summoned Lump and his gang to hopefully kill them so I don't have to run over there. However, eventually they just break and leave for no real reason. Meaning I gotta run all the way over there to these other gobos who are just staring at a wall. However, again, thanks to being early level marshals, we clean up the fight pretty easily, even if a few of us go down to Ragslin. I freed Halcyon and killed some Gobbo kids for their XP, and finished up in the camp for now. I did do Ethel next, however, when OBS was converting the footage to an MP4 file for editing, it corrupted both files, so I just don't have the footage. But it was pretty easy. We're 4 martial classes, so we didn't end up triggering her legendary action at all, and so Lae'zel and Shadowheart just beat the hell out of her until she surrendered, and using most of my inspiration die, I was able to get the hair and save Marina. I gave her the Connor wand and long rested. I then, for some reason, decided Astarion's going to be better than Karlach for my party until I get Minthara. My main thought process, I think, was that, well, I'm going to use him to get the strength potion, so I might as well just have him in the party. I then go murder the Paladins of Tyr. With Anders dying to a riposte from Lae'zel. Then, using Lae'zel, I got some XP talking to the Gith at the bridge, and then I remember I never got Crusher's Ring, so I returned to the Goblin Camp for some more XP. Again, I use Lump and the boys to help with the action economy, and I run into one of the problems with the party. Even with scrolls, 4 fighters just don't have a lot of AoE damage. While getting certain gear and Mind Flare powers later will remedy this, right now it's just dangerous to fight this many goblins with just our small number of martial attacks. However, thanks to the sacrifice of Lump and the boys, we kill all the Gobos for their XP and steal Lump's circlet to help us pass some checks later. Clearing the last few goblins to hit the Selûnite outpost gives us 5th level and our major power spike. Now all of us have extra attacks, and with our party, with Action Surge, we have 16 attacks. And now that we are 5th level, we can now proceed to clear out the Underdark. Of course, Raphael comes in to yap at us, so we skip all his dialogue and go steal the XP from this Minotaur. Shooting the statues from this site, we trigger the surprise round for the spectator without getting stuck in the surprise round. And my new favorite tactic of dealing with this fight is using the spectator in a bottle and just throw him like a Pokemon to bait out a lot of the other spectators' attacks. Now, of course, our spectator immediately fails the Paralyze Ray, which forces us to intervene. Normally I want one of the spectators to trigger their legendary action, but this time I end up having to sacrifice Astarion. Though, thanks to that legendary action, it freed the other drow, which gave us some meat shields. Eventually killing both spectators, we get some special dialogue as a female drow, but I just skip through it all and kill them for their XP and long rest. This triggers our next Dark Urge cutscene, where we get the Deathstalker mantle, which is going to be good for Shadowheart. I grab Valar Aluv and just hand it off to Astarion as he's filling out the support role for now, as I just don't have the gear to make Champion viable. Killing a pair of Minotaurs, we head over to the Myconid colony, meet up with my homie Blurg and Homelium, while also starting the quests to kill the Duragar and find Balin. I grab the Boots of Speed and go out to clear the Suser Tree. I go ahead and grab some Noble Stock, murder the dude in here because he's a piece of shit, and kill the Hook Hoarders and their Guardian, while facing off against the Bolette. Now in Honor mode, if you aren't prepared to fight the Bolette, you're probably going to fail. You need, really, the Minotaur Spore Servant to consistently knock it down to have advantage on attacking it. Also, if you don't have a way to consistently deal over 15 damage with a single attack, such as using pretty much any throw build with Tavern Brawler, you're not going to be able to remove its scales. Now, being 4 fighters actually makes this one of the easiest times I've ever had dealing with the Bolette. The thrower removed the scales, and the other 3 just wailed on it until it died. And now using Sovereign Galette to raise the Bolette, you can use it to solo the beach fight, which is what I usually do. Usually, I just want it to take care of Gek at least, so he doesn't raise the zombies, which are annoying. But dealing with this Duragar, I make sure to kill Glut and head over to the Arcane Tower. Now, jumping down and failing a lot of sleight of hand checks. Finally make it into the tower, power it on, read some books, grab the mushrooms for the quests, and grab a bunch of items. Notably picking up the Strength Club, which I'll be handing to Shadowheart. I finish Amelium's quest and buy the Boots of Stormy Clamor, which are pretty broken in pretty much every build that you put them on. Reverberation is one of the best debuffs in the game that even if you miss, you can stack it, because the qualification for what counts as a condition is super wide. So even if you miss, you can end up knocking enemies over if you have enough reverberation stacking items. I then go and become a god of the Kuo-toa, and head to the Forge. I make a deal with Brithvar to deal with Nier, kidnap a Scrying Eye, push it off a cliff, then I kill 3 dickhead Duragar who are bullying the Rothe. And in hindsight, I didn't really need to do this because the Protecty Sparks wall isn't meant for any of my characters, so I do get to give Shadowheart a nice idol, and that's something, I guess. Regardless, I head over to Philomene and get my Rune Powder Vial, which I almost never use, so I don't know why I go over there. Regardless, I blow up the hole and face off against Nier. And Nier is actually one of the weakest bosses in the game. In this fight, it's actually the Mind Masters who are the most dangerous. And so long as you're not the one hitting Nier when his mirrors are up, you can just ignore him. And usually, I just hit him once, and then let the meat shields kill themselves on the mirror for, more loot. And eventually, I land a hold person on him from a scroll, and Lae'zel just kills him.
This is your end.
Cleaning up the fight, I free the gnomes and make sure to talk to Barkus so I can actually use him as a merchant in Act 2, because he has some gloves I want. I then loot Nier's body and take his space gummy. As for fighters, I can actually use the things you can craft in the forge, so I make sure to collect a bunch of junk. I grab the 2 armor molds as well as the ores. And ever since learning you can just huck junk at Grim, I have not fought him normally, I think since patch 4. So, after spending a bunch of time throwing a bunch of junk at the Mephits and Grim, I forge a medium and heavy set of the Antimantine armor. And finishing everything in Act 1, I'm gonna head over to the Creche. Well, first I scam Esther of all her useful stuff, and then I make my way over to the Creche itself. At 6th level we get another feat. One of the key features of a fighter is you get more feats. But the problem is, in BG3 the feat selection is just basic feats from the base game of Dungeons & Dragons. And feats are pretty bad in Dungeons & Dragons. Most feats in 5th edition itself, even with all the books, are pretty useless or very niche. And while it's nice that pretty much everyone's going to have alert by the end, there really isn't any reason that I would want any more feats. The characters that need the specialized feats like Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter already have them, so I'm mostly going to be picking ASIs for the rest of the game. And also at this point, I end up having Shadowheart switch to use the Titan String Bow with the Club of Strength, and she'll be one of my primary damage dealers throughout the rest of this run. Next, I murder a bunch of kobolds in Grimishka, and as we're 4 fighters, the Grimishka are no challenge at all. And normally I use Shovel to clear out their surprise, but this time I didn't, so I just threw a bomb at them. And it turns out, you can clear out their surprise condition by just throwing a bomb at them. Then I go around and grab all the items I need for the Dawnmaster's crest. I grab the Morning Lord's Radiance buff, and normally I would long rest first, but fighters really don't need long rests too much. You just need the short rest to refresh your action surge, and that's about it. I only really end up long resting when I run out of short rests. And even the classes that have resources like the Battle Master, Arcane Archer, or Eldritch Knight, I don't even really need those resources. Most of our damage is just hitting things until they die. So I get the buff and head on down into the crush. And I attempt to get the awakening buff. And while it's not necessary, I really like having it because the illithid powers are just fun. And now, unfortunately, I intended to restart my recording here, as I was playing in multiple sessions. And when I started my next recording, apparently the entire section of the crush was corrupted. Second time, by the way. Great. And I only discovered this once I started Act 2. To summarize, I killed everyone and got Blood of Lathander. The Dex Gloves and the Knife Under Mountain King, yada yada yada. Regardless, let's just move on to Act 2. We begin Act 2 by paying a visit to the goons waiting for the Drider, and killing them, which gives us enough XP for 7th level. And by this point, I really don't care about levels anymore. The only thing that they really give me is a higher proficiency bonus and eventually a 3rd extra attack. Finishing our level ups, I summon the Drider and begin combat. And without any allies, we can just focus him down. With poor initiative, only Phyta is able to deal damage before he uses his Sanctuary ability, and he does some minor damage to Astarion before he casts it. And as for fighters, our options to deal with Sanctuary are actually very limited. So Shadowheart has to spam AoE arrows next to him to stack Reverberation. And I decided to just heal Astarion and pop Falar Aloof here for later returns. With Lae'zel, I just have her spam the cleave attacks, and pass back to Phyta. And this is really the only fight where having access to spells as the Eldritch Knight has been any useful at all, so I can cast Shatter to deal some damage. After a slog of a fight, I free the Pixie and get protection from the Shadow Curse. Heading over to Last Light Inn and getting groped by Jaheira, head on over to Tally and sell off all our junk and scam all the useful items like the Cloak of Protection and this pretty decent shield. Next, I go and procure the Flawed Helldusk set from Dammon, with the gloves actually providing some fire damage to Phyta. The helmet goes to Lae'zel, and the armor, well, Flawed Helldusk armor kinda sucks. Head on over to Barcus and grab the overpowered gloves of Automaton from Barcus, which offered a pretty broken buff. And next I start the Isabel fight by precasting some buffs on ourselves and ensuring we have vigilance elixirs to get initiative. The main goal here is to make sure Marcus dies before he gets a turn, because if he lives to have a turn, the odds of Isabel dying is pretty high. And for insurance, I throw an Isaviz potion at Isabel before securing the kill on Marcus. Once Marcus is down, it's pretty light work making sure all the ghouls are dead. Now, provided Isabel doesn't kill herself with opportunity attacks, which has happened before, luckily she didn't do it this time and we were able to clean up the ghouls. Grabbing another space gummy and a decent ring for Lae'zel, I then head out to Last Night to continue Roland's quest and save him from the shadows. Finally, we make it to Moonrise Towers. Here, I scam Lantar for the Sentinel Shield so we can get Shadowheart, some better initiative, and a Halberd for Lae'zel. Making sure to grab the Drake Throat Glaive for Roa Moonglow, we can go about recruiting Minthara. First, I make Astarion bite this lady for a potion, then I go past some checks, saving Minthara and recruiting her to replace Astarion, and now my girl squad is complete. And Minthara is going to be the crit fishing champion fighter, which again is mid. Next, I go visit the Gold Lady, the Fat Guy, and the Doctor, and talk them all to death. I then go pick up the Helm of Arcane Acuity for Shadowheart, and tell Arabella she's an orphan now. Heading back out into the Shadowlands, I go play hide-and-seek with a kid to go streamline Halsin's quest later. Then I head back to Moonrise Prison and kill everybody inside so I can free the Tieflings and Wulbren.
Agreed. I can do better.
From here I go out into the dock, pushing some guys into the water, and steal this barrel of gummies. which I forgot was explosive. And finally, I start doing Halsin's quest. Now, at first I was wondering if this was going to be hard with 4 fighters, but with some scrolls it was pretty easy. And it was at this point I started to think that I should probably just restrict scrolls from the martial classes that don't have any spellcasting, like fighters are supposed to. Do let me know in the comments if that's a good idea. Regardless, killing all these waves of enemies gives us enough XP to level up to 8th level, which I typically want to be 8th level before I challenge Moonrise. 8th level, we get us more feats, which, again, don't really know what to grab because most feats are useless, so I just go with ASIs for Foida, Shart, Lae'zel, and grab Alert from Anthara. I also remember to do the second part of Halsin's quest, and this Oliver fight is actually kind of tricky depending on your initiative. The clones he makes hit you pretty hard, and if you don't have access to reliable forms of sure hit AoE, like Magic Missile, they can kill you if you're not careful. And by now, Shadowheart has gotten pretty reliable damage output using the Titan String Bow and the Club of Giant Strength. However, I'm mostly disappointed that the Arcane Archer features, the core concept of the subclass, are pretty useless compared to the regular elemental arrows. Finishing up Halsin's quest, Lae'zel wants to do the boogie, and now it's time for Shar's Funhouse. And once I get the fast travel, I remember I should go fishing for the lightning jabber because I almost always forget to grab it with throwing builds. But regardless, I head on over to Balthazar, and because I'm lazy and wanted to eat some food, I just knocked on his door and turned him hostile. Then let him and the Justiciars fight it out. And he will always lose this fight, so if you're ever doing something like a solo run, or you're not confident in handling him plus the Justiciars outside, you can just knock the door and let them kill each other. Just make sure to turn him hostile so you get XP when he dies. But watching this fight, I got bored because I finished my food, so I just joined in. By now, the party is pretty much unstoppable. We have a collective 16 attacks in a round with Action Surge, and sustainable, somewhat AoE thanks to the Shadowheart arrows. And Lae'zel is a great weapon master with 20 strength, and so anything that gets hit by all 4 attacks is pretty much going to die unless it's like Merkel. Now, this fight, if you let all the Justiciars spawn, takes a long time just because there's so many of them. And be careful, the Justiciars with the crossbows are the most dangerous thing in here. Afterwards, I knock the door, grab the coruscation ring, and do Shar's Funhouse. Making sure to grab the spear, I head over to get the final orb from Ygir. This fight really wasn't an issue. Being 4 fighters, we kind of just ran in there and beat the hell out of him, and I just used some scrolls. I make sure to get one final long rest so I can scam the merchants one more time, and the owlbearer decides to show up now for some reason. Regardless, I go ahead and free the Night Song, and it's time to challenge Moonrise.
No hesitation. Let my name be known.
I actually quite like this fight in Moonrise Towers, especially if you get the full cavalcade of meat shields. This fight is actually pretty fun and pretty well balanced even if you're not min-maxing your characters. Leaving our meat shields to tank hits for us, I send Lae'zel into the backline to take care of the most dangerous part of this fight, the Adepts. Their hungry haters can actually kill all your meat shields pretty quickly, and I also send Shadowheart and Foida to the rafters to deal damage from above. Now, the fists, as usual, are pretty useless, and they're mostly there just to tank all the smites from the zealots. However, the Harpers themselves can do pretty decent damage, especially if they target the same target. Now, Zarel also likes to spam Black Hole, which is pretty annoying for anyone you leave on the ground. Regardless, cleaning it up, we head to the rooftop and challenge Ketheric. Now, you think you're going to be able to talk him down, but, Aelin has to show up and ruin everything. And so we get to do our favorite rooftop fight. Making sure to use the haste bow I picked up from Dammon, I make sure to haste Shadowheart and hide Minthara, so she doesn't break any concentration, and spread everyone out. And then everyone gets scared by Ketheric's spooky screech. This is pretty annoying, and Minthara just uses a fireball scroll before running away. Now, thanks to Fear, Phyta only lands one hit, and Shart tries her best to clear out all the skeletons. Aelin breaks free and wastes her actions, as usual, forcing Phyta to push Ketheric with some more throws. But regardless, we're able to end the fight up here on the rooftop, and I remember I should probably go grab some items from Balthazar and Isabel's rooms. Finally heading down to the Mind Flayer colony, I free the lads in the pods, find Mizora in her pod, and just kind of purge her, because I don't really care. This gives us XP for 9th level, and this level, while normally really impactful for most runs, is pretty useless for us. All we really get is Indomitable, which is pretty meh of a feature. I also make sure to do this fight and grab the Githrazai Mind Barrier. Then, finally grabbing the long rest station, I head down to the Brain. As for prepping for this fight, I make sure everyone casts Shield of Thralls on themselves and summon 4 air elementals. Their main job is going to be dealing with all the adds in the fight, because I predict it's going to be very long. And I'm unsure how good our damage output in general is going to be, because Merkel has a lot of resistances, and Aelin is also pretty useless. And I also realize at this point, I really forgot to get Scratch's ball, so I can't use him to free Aelin for me, and I also didn't save us, so I don't have a reliable way to guarantee a surprise round. Either way, after I set up, I start the fight by yapping Ketheric into phase 2. With all the ladies pre-positioned in their spots, I start attacking. And look at the damage Phyta is doing. 8 damage with a throw, with 21 strength and Tavern Brawler. Minthara with scrolls is also doing pretty much no damage, and the only one doing any real damage is Shadowheart, while Lae'zel spends her first turn killing this Mind Flayer. And one of the cornerstones of this fight is I have to use the Doom Hammer from Act 1. Lae'zel also has to turn off Great Weapon Master to actually land any hits, and does 8 damage. Thankfully she's applying this Bone Shield so Merkel won't heal during this entire fight. Now, Merkel can't really kill us, it's just we have to sit here and wail on Merkel for 20 minutes to finally, eventually kill him. Grabbing Ketheric's Netherstone, we pick up his armor and shield and finally finish up in here and head out. Making sure to kill the Gith, blocking our way to Baldur's Gate, we leave Act 2 and our sleepy time is interrupted by a surprise attack, and we have to head over and help the MP kill a bunch of monks, and I get the Baja Blast Gummy. And I also convince everyone to take it, which gives us all Fly at Will, which is really broken. And more importantly, I get to have expertise on persuasion checks, which is important when we enter Act 3. Entering into Act 3, we get to run around Rivington and yap to a bunch of people. I yap to these dudes, kill the firework guy, visit this guy, and pick up the Hellrider longbow. And a familiar ox. Unfortunately, this ox also breaks a lot, so I don't get to successfully take him into Baldur's Gate, as usual. I then visit the fair and grab Nerolna and the Band of Mystic Scoundrel. After that, I purchase a statue for the permanent Bless buff, and murder a clown and his posse.
Am I indeed? Perhaps I will tell my favorite joke. It is about you bleeding to death.
Oh, right there!
Meeting up with Raphael, we sign the deal so we can get the Orphic Hammer immediately, which is going to be Phyta's main weapon for the rest of the game. This is also so we can get the Silver Sword for Lae'zel, which is basically her best in slot. Next, I plan on doing some Stone Lord bullshit, so I head on over there and kill those guys to get more space gummies for the girlies. Running into Worm's Rock, we rescue Floric and ignore Gortash. Heading into Baldur's Gate, I steal some items from the Holy Tabernacle and have Shadowheart make a 5k donation to Selûne for a permanent buff. And since we investigated a short guy's room, and we are able to attack him here before he murders this woman, and thanks to our initiative stacking, plus alert, we're able to murder him before he uses his space shunt boots, because we don't have a reliable counterspell for him. And it is by this point our builds are pretty much unstoppable. It's just going to take a few more gear pieces for everybody except Minthara, because Champion Fighter kind of sucks, to be pretty much able to kill everything in this game. Going throughout the city, I secure the Armor of Persistence and the Armor of Agility, as well as the Deadshot Bow from Minthara. I also plan on using the Duelist Prerogative, so I go ahead and start the Hag quest line. And then, because I want to make a shopping district a la Morgana Evelyn, I save Volo and grab the Harbor Fast Travel Point. This fight is pretty trivial with Black Hole plus Neurona, as you can see with this. Stealing some more space gummies, I end up having to kill these Steel Watchers, and it's here I remember that Mind Sanctuary, thanks to the changes, is just free haste. And now I do mess up a little bit here. I forget you get a debuff when you kill a Steel Watcher that you have to wait off, like when you escape prison. But I immediately fast traveled back to the lower city to start grabbing the merchants from my shopping district, and this happens. And while I'm in no real danger, this fight is kind of a slog, and a few of us go down. This forces me to go long rest, and I find Jaheira dead in my camp. I'm not sure why she's dead, but oh well, it just means I won't be able to recruit Minsk, which I never used in the first place. Next, I decided to go murder Lororican. I don't really need anything from him, but, you know, just XP, I guess. And there's some good scrolls.
Alright then.
As you can see, our single target damage output is really high, so dealing with him isn't hard at all. Next, I head on over to the Blushing Mermaid and attack Ethel and her murder her redcaps. Heading down, I non-lethal some of the crew. I don't know how they died, but whatever. I go on to fight Ethel, and using some Blight Scrolls we can kill her mushrooms pretty easily because they always do max damage to plants. And with some action surges, I clear out her clones pretty easily. And then after throwing the Hag's Bane, Shadowheart killed Ethel in one round with 2 crits.
First step is the hardest.
Returning and picking up my new sword, we get the 11th level and our 3rd attack for all the girls. Now our damage output is truly ludicrous. All 4 girlies with Action Surge can do 24 attacks in one round. Now, the rest of our time is spent farming XP, so I kill the Gif in the tavern and farm Cazador's Manor. And while I was there, I just decided to go kill Cazador. Now, this fight is pretty easy if Astarion is just sitting in your camp, so in the future, I'm either going to kill him or keep him in my party to make this fight, you know, actually challenging somewhat. Though it is funny watching him slip on ice. also get to see that Minthara really isn't doing any damage to resistant enemies, and I initially thought to have her use the Acuity helmet plus the Band of Mystic Scoundrel to kind of control enemies, just because she's going to hit a lot, but the melee is just really not meant for this, and it also makes her dependent on scrolls again, which feels kind of eh. So I end up having Shadowheart do this, but again in the future, I'm going to try not to rely on scrolls too much playing the marshals. After beating up Cazador, I head down and beat up an elephant to become an unholy assassin. Then I murder Saravok, and with the ballast armor, Floida is able to do a lot of damage throwing random knives and javelins at him. And next we start getting rid of Mystic Carrion's organs. And this fight is pretty tricky because of his immunities to regular damage, and his legendary resistance that makes him immune to all damage unless you have Remove Curse or Greater Restoration. Now, those two scrolls in particular are very hard to come by. In this entire playthrough, I only came across 3 scrolls of Remove Curse. So, our plan, hit him till he dies, basically, and eventually I'm able to land a telekinesis with a scroll from Lae'zel, and so we're able to wail on him without his reaction going off. And after killing him and his minions, we're good to go, and we hit 12th level. Pissed off from all these Steel Watchers, I decided to go kill Gortash, and it is at this point I realize, oh yeah, I never did the coronation, and he isn't in his room, and so I go to the throne room, and I try non-lethaling the Duke, but he just kind of dies, and I don't know why the Emperor protects him down in the Iron Throne but not up here, but whatever. Now, if you didn't know, if you successfully give the Noble Stock to the Bone Cloak down there in the Underdark all the way back in Act 1, she sells it here in Act 3. And it's a very useful item, just in case, because just at the cost of 1 action point, you can remove any condition, including Gortash's legendary condition. Now, fighting Gortash, and you never attended the ceremony up here, there's a lot of adds, which make this fight, again, another slog. But unlike in Act 1, we're in no danger here. We can kill everybody, it's just, there's a lot of dudes we gotta kill. With Gortash's Netherstone in hand, it's time for the House of Hope. And thanks to Hold Monster plus Arcane Acuity, I'm able to murder Harlot pretty easily and raid Raphael's vaults. The gloves are going to Shadowheart to free up her elixir slot, which I forget, and the amulet's going to Lae'zel for even more HP. And making sure to clear out the house of all of the debtors, I free Hope and start abusing the Restoration Faucet to make sure I fully buff up before dealing with Raphael. An easy way if you're abusing the Helm of Arcane Acuity is to move all this furniture here, stack it up, and then start the conversation. This way, you can have a 95% hold monster on Raphael, and then you can move someone like Minthara, who has the Ballast Armor, to put Aura of Murder on there to reduce his resistance. At least, that was the plan. And as you can see from Minthara's damage, the Ballast Armor isn't working. Shadowheart, on the other hand, having 3 attacks with just 1 action, and Action Surge, is able to clear out many of the targets with arrows of many targets and a few fiend-slaying arrows. And it's seeing this damage and checking the log that I realized the Aura of Murder is just not working. I don't know why, but it's broken for the rest of the playthrough. Anyway, Lae'zel comes in and uses 6 guaranteed crits to put down the devil before he even gets a turn. Heading back, I actually do a proper 1v1 against Auron. Now, personally, I like doing the 1v1 with Auron in her Slayer form, because if she doesn't have it, the fight is way too easy, even if you don't use it yourself. So, before this, I pre-buff with Shield of Thralls, Fire Shield, the Automaton Gloves, and pre-cast Dance Macabre. And on her first turn, I chuck the Orphic Hammer at her over and over again. And of course, I forgot that I pre-buffed with Haste and tried to use Mind Sanctuary. Thankfully, it was Celestial Haste, so I didn't get lethargic. Otherwise, Auron could have just murdered me right here.
Good idea, I think.
Now, thanks to my minions and their initiative, they manage to surround her so she has to jump. And unfortunately, I get feared by her spooky scream, and so my turn is skipped. And at this point, I'm kind of actually worried. Then Auron gets crit by the ghouls and paralyzed, who then crit her to death. After that, I reject Ball, and I don't need Power Word Kill, so I just skip all the yapping and move on. And before heading to the brain, I forget to save Shadowheart's parents, but oh well, I'm not romancing her this run, so I don't really care. By this point, I was getting kind of exhausted with the gameplay loop, so I went ahead and just went to the brain. And failing all the saves to dominate it, I ended up becoming a Mind Flayer. Freeing Orpheus for Obey Lae'zel, I then actually start fighting through this courtyard because I actually like it. You're at full power with your builds, and you get to summon a bunch of meat shields, and it's pretty fun encounter if you just take it as it is. Now, the one encounter I always skip is going to be this fucking climb. I hate it. It's so annoying with the non-alloyed shooting at you, and so I just take an invis pot and fly up there. Making sure to pre-buff everybody with Shield of Thralls and refreshing my Illithid powers with Angelic Slumber, I head off to face against the MP after his hissy fit. Now, for the brain fight, if you have all the allies, you can just spam all of them in the center and just freely ignore all the enemies there. And now remember, Mind Sanctuary breaks the Call Allies function, so if you're a Mind Flayer, you gotta use everybody else to call them. I use up speed potions to summon a nice wall of meat shield so I can run up to the side and sit in a globe of invulnerability to make sure my speed potions drop. Opening up the portal, I head inside, and thanks to initiative order, I actually have to wait around all the time, and all the enemies outside are dead, so it's kind of funny watching all the allies just run around. Again, I had to run into something that killed my very first honor run. Trying to throw anything at the brain is bugged to all hell, forcing me to just run down and smack the brain for overall less damage. My only goal with the first turn was to trigger the brain's reaction, and thanks to Action Surge, I get to smack on it a bit. Now, Lae'zel gets down there and lays down some hate with Action Surge plus a speed potion. The brain's down to 120 HP. And again, thanks to initiative, I have to wait around before Shadowheart and Minthara get through. Then 2 Aberration Slaying Arrows later, the brain is dead and 4 fighters beat Baldur's Gate 3 on honor mode. For my thoughts as playing the 4 fighter subclasses, let's go from party order. For the Eldritch Knight, the thrower build is simply worse than a giant barbarian. Having access to knock is really the only good thing about it. However, that's offset by having a terrible weapon selection. Being limited to the small number of weapons with a thrown quality, our options are pretty limited. And I almost never had to use the spells I had access to. I can only think of one time, and that was with Karnus and being able to use Shatter. Now, if I were to multi-class into something that gave us higher level spell slots, upcasting Shadowblade and abusing the Resonance Stone would be pretty cool. As for playing 12 straight levels of an Eldritch Knight, it just felt like a weaker fighter that can use knock. Now, Battle Master is the ideal fighter. Its spells, or maneuvers, are all in line with the theme of what a fighter should be, a guy who fights. In fact, in a lot of my home games, I use a homebrew rule that gives all the fighter subclasses access to some of the maneuvers, though they can never upgrade their superiority die, and it's a weaker superiority die. The maneuvers are a real way to give the fighters access to spells without making them spells, if you understand my meaning. And of course, here in Baldur's Gate 3, their use is slightly more limited because you don't have a DM who's going to set up encounters that gives you an option specifically to make use of your maneuvers. As for 12 levels of Battle Master, the entire time it was pretty satisfying. Having 6 attacks and different useful ways to use them was fun. Now for Champion Fighter, it sins not once but twice. Not only is it boring, because you have no real interaction besides hitting things with your weapon, it is also bad. The only useful feature you get from 12 levels of Champion Fighter is a crit reduction of 1. However, the problem with adopting 5e is that all of your power, or at least most of your power, is designed to come from your class. And looking here, the only boost to damage you get is from the crit reduction. An extra fighting style and the athletics bonus is much like illusion magic. Unless you are able to gaslight a DM, using that is pointless. And even if you do the viable build, which is Great Weapon Master with the crit fishing gear, it's just a worse Battle Master. The crits really don't compare to being able to use maneuvers and superiority die. As for Arcane Archer, it has a lot of potential. Archer fighters are always fun and good. The problem is, the damage from the Arcane Archer from using the spells you get is just less compared to the Elemental Arrows. And if you were a Battle Master Archer as opposed to an Arcane Archer, you would have access to maneuvers from your archery skills, so you could use the Elemental Arrows as well as maneuvers to be more useful. And Shadowheart may have been my largest source of damage, but that's because you had the Titan String Bow and reliable access to elixirs. I would say the only useful part of playing an Arcane Archer over a Battle Master is you have access to guidance. And that's about it. In conclusion, it was a balanced experience through the entire game. I never felt truly weak. Just at the end of the game, due to lack of having any real dedicated AoE damage without using scrolls, it was a huge slogfest. Now, 4 fighters can definitely clear the game with little issues. It's just going to be a bit boring and repetitive later in the game. And if I were to ever play as 4 fighters again, I would just do 4 Battle Masters. The other subclasses are just worse versions of a Battle Master. This has been Zach with etc. Thanks for watching.